I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is senior editor Dan Alexander. Dan, thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me.
You have a new report about Gucci renegotiating its rent at Trump Tower, and you write that the high-end store apparently took, quote, the artist of the deal to the cleaners. I want you to set the scene for us first, where the storefront is on the corner of 56th Street and 5th Avenue in the heart of midtown Manhattan. Sounds like prime real estate. Is that not the case?
It has been prime real estate for a long time. I mean, you think New York, you think shopping, you think Fifth Avenue, and particularly this part of Fifth Avenue. You go to that area and you look around, it's every major retail brand that you would know, not just in the United States, but internationally. And Gucci is just one of those. And so, yeah, it has been a huge, huge moneymaker for Donald Trump over the years. And it continues to bring in a significant amount of rent. But the market has just gotten a lot worse than it once was. With a lot more people shopping from home, you can now buy everything from your couch in your living room. You don't have to go to Fifth Avenue in New York City. That's a huge thing. And then also COVID-19 obviously put a shock on retail real estate in general, and this area was no exception. Those two factors have driven down rents in the area and have hurt landlords, including Donald Trump.
Let's talk about the origin story of Gucci in this storefront. So first, as you reported, Gucci first leased the place in 2008 and agreed to pay Trump about $20 million a year until 2026. Knowing the location and the size of the store, was that a fair price? Or knowing that it's 2008 in the midst of the financial crisis, was this a deal?
Well, it was a big price at the time. And remember, they opened in 2008, but in order to open a place, you're signing the lease a little bit before that. So likely when they're signing this deal, it's sort of in the height of the boom times before the big crash. And 2008 happens, and fortunately for Donald Trump, he has this amazing lease locked in until 2026, where he's going to be able to make, it starts at a little less than $20 million, but ultimately escalates above $20 million for years ahead. So this was a huge deal for him. There's no reason to think that it was anything other than a, standard market transaction. But certainly it was a big one and an eye-catching number of about $20 million a year in rent.
You said that the lease was supposed to go until 2026, but your reporting says that they renegotiated it during 2020. What other details do you have about that?
Yeah, it's interesting. If you think about when you want to renegotiate a lease, if you're a landlord, 2020 is the worst time that you could possibly imagine. So landlords are looking for people to come into their properties. Retailers don't really need space. They're just losing money paying rent. So it was a moment in which Donald Trump basically had no leverage. And what looks like happened is Gucci came in and said, okay, we want to renegotiate this lease. And what they did is they extended it out for an additional 12 years, so until about 2038. But the cost of doing that was that it looks like Gucci's rent decreased by what we're estimating to be about $7 million a year. It had been at $22 million and it went down to 15. That's a big hit for Donald Trump. And if you take that, over the entire time, so over, say, 6 years from 2020 to 2026, when that lease was going to expire, that's roughly $42 million of rent that Donald Trump is missing out on. Remember, this is a guy who, although he's extremely rich, we have him at about $2.5 billion, he's not all that liquid. And so right now he has about $425 million in cash. It's more than he's had in a long time. Even out of that chunk, $42 million is a lot. Back when he did this lease in 2020, he only had about $90 million in cash. This was equivalent to about half of the cash in his personal fortune that he was essentially foregoing for the next 6 years.
$42 million is such an eye-popping, astronomical number that you can't even imagine this. Did this immediately negatively impact Donald Trump's net worth?
Yes. The profitability of Trump Tower declined. And when you're valuing commercial properties, one of the main things that you're looking at is what is the net operating income of that property. And so this dragged down the net operating income significantly. and that decreased the value of the commercial space at Trump Tower, which ultimately resulted in decreasing Donald Trump's personal fortune.
Let's talk about the backdrop of when this deal took place, 2020. You said this was an especially bad time for landlords, as we all know, and this was especially a tough time for Donald Trump himself. As we know, he was president. He was trying to navigate the country during the pandemic, at the same time trying to run a re-election campaign. So how involved was Donald Trump specifically in this deal?
Uh, we don't believe that he was very involved at all. His sons were running the business, uh, but he was certainly aware of what was going on in his business. In fact, he talked about it from the White House briefing room. And there's always been some question about what his level of involvement was in his finances while he was president. He claimed that he wasn't going to have any role. Eric Trump, shortly into the presidency, told me in a meeting in Trump Tower that he did plan to update his father on the finances of the business while he was in office. So you've got contradicting information. And certainly with a deal that's this large, uh, it's the sort of thing that it's hard to imagine him not being aware of. But we just don't know exactly what the communications were between Trump and his kids as these lease negotiations were all taking place.